The hum of the warp core resonated through the primary hull of the USS Enterprise D, a constant, comforting thrum against the backdrop of distant, glittering nebulae on the main view screen. Commander William Riker, standing at his tactical console on the bridge, reviewed long-range sensor scans of the largely uncharted Vula expanse. Below him, Data's amber eyes meticulously tracked quantum fluctuations, his synthetic mind processing data streams at speeds no organic brain could match. It was a routine deep space patrol, an exercise in the Federation's unending quest for discovery, when the universe decided to make a sudden, profound contradiction. "Captain, I'm detecting an unusual energy signature bearing 247 Mark 310. Data's voice cut through the ship's quiet efficiency, devoid of alarm, yet carrying an undeniable edge of anomaly. Temporal flux readings are spiking dramatically. Subspace resonance is off the scale. On the command chair, Captain Jean-Luc Picard leaned forward, his brow furrowed with a familiar blend of curiosity and caution. "On screen, Mr. Data. Magnify." The serene, starlit expanse on the main view screen shimmered, distorting like a heat haze, before coalescing into a volatile, swirling vortex of iridescent blues and purples. It pulsed with an impossible energy, a raw wound in the fabric of space that defied known physical laws. Even for the seasoned crew of the Enterprise, it was an unprecedented sight. "Geordi, what are we looking at?" Picard asked, turning his head slightly towards the engineering station. From his position, Chief Engineer LaForge, his visor glowing faintly, responded with a mix of awe and trepidation. "Captain, my readings are... I've never seen anything like it. It's radiating an energy signature consistent with a localized, hyper-accelerated quantum entanglement, but at a scale that should be impossible. It's like a piece of a different reality is trying to force its way into ours. Shields up, red alert." Klaxons blared, painting the bridge in a pulsing crimson. The ship's internal lights dimmed slightly and the familiar thrumming intensified, shifting into a defensive thrum as the shields snapped into place. Worf's growl of readiness echoed from the tactical station. "Hail them!" Picard ordered, his voice calm but firm. "On all frequencies, attempt to establish communication." Data's fingers danced across his console. "No response, Captain. The anomaly appears to be a chaotic rupture, not a vessel." As he spoke, the vortex compressed rapidly, collapsing inward with an almost deafening thrum that vibrated through the deck plates. Then, just as suddenly, it vanished, leaving behind only the residual, impossible energy readings that still screamed across the Enterprise's sensors. And standing silently on the bridge, directly behind Data's console, was a man. He was tall, completely naked, and glowing with an ethereal, cerulean light. His skin, a vibrant, impossible blue, seemed to hum with contained energy, displaying intricate anatomical detail as if carved from living light. His eyes, devoid of iris or pupil, glowed with the same unsettling blue, staring not at the bridge crew, but seemingly through them, through the ship, and perhaps through time itself. There was no sound of a transporter, no shimmer of molecular reintegration. He was simply there. For a single, suspended beat, the bridge was utterly silent, the only sound the receding alarm klaxons and the frantic beeping of consoles registering the aftermath of the anomaly, and now the impossible presence. Worf was the first to react, his phaser rifle snapping up, aimed directly at the blue figure. "Halt!" Worf roared, his voice thick with Klingon challenge and Starfleet protocol. "Identify yourself!" The blue man did not react. He remained utterly still, his gaze fixed on nothing discernible. Data, who had been mere inches from where the figure materialized, slowly turned his head, his face a mask of data-gathering curiosity rather than fear. Picard rose slowly from his command chair, his eyes fixed on the impossible visitor. "Lower your weapon, Mr. Worf. Stand down. Everyone, maintain positions. Do not engage unless provoked." His eyes, however, did not leave the enigmatic being. "Sensors, Mr. Data? LaForge, report on any internal readings." Data processed quickly. "Remarkable, Captain. My internal sensors indicate a humanoid life form, but one composed almost entirely of manipulated subatomic particles. His molecular structure is shifting and reconfiguring at a rate far exceeding any known biological process. He registered 0.0001 seconds after the anomaly dissipated. It is as if he was extruded from it." LaForge whistled softly. "Captain, I'm detecting trace elements of exotic matter in his immediate vicinity, and his personal energy signature is simply off the charts. It's fluctuating between various quantum states. He's emitting gravimetric distortion fields too. Our shields are barely registering a ripple from him, even though his energy output is comparable to a small star." Picard cautiously approached the figure, stopping several meters away. The air around the blue man felt strangely cold, almost sterile. "I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard, commanding the USS Enterprise. You are on a Starfleet vessel. Can you understand me?" The blue man's head, slowly, infinitesimally, tilted. Then a voice, deep and resonant, yet utterly devoid of emotion, filled the bridge. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, directly into their minds, yet also vibrating in the air. "I am a being who perceives existence. My designation, by those of my previous reality, was Jonathan Osterman. They called me Dr. Manhattan." His words, delivered in perfect, unaccented Federation standard, sent a fresh wave of unease through the crew. The universal translator had registered his voice, but there was an unnatural quality to its projection. "Dr. Manhattan," Picard repeated, testing the name. "How did you come to be on my ship? What is your purpose?" Dr. Manhattan's luminous eyes seemed to expand, taking in the entire bridge, then the ship itself, then perhaps the stars beyond. The quantum entanglement became unstable, a rupture. I followed the causal cascade into this iteration of reality. There is no purpose, as you understand it. Only events, I observe, I perceive. His perception of no purpose sent a shiver down Picard's spine. This was not a being driven by ambition or conquest or even exploration. This was something else entirely. Picard knew instinctively that this encounter would challenge every philosophical tenet the Federation held dear. It was a test of their understanding, not just of the universe, but of themselves. Riker exchanged a glance with Troi, whose empathetic abilities were clearly overwhelmed. She clutched her head, wincing. "Captain, I feel nothing concrete, only an immense, cold void of existence. He's not thinking in a way I can comprehend. There are echoes of infinite possibility and absolute certainty all at once." "Understood, Counselor," Picard said, his gaze unwavering from Manhattan. "Your assistance, Dr. Manhattan, in understanding the nature of your arrival would be greatly appreciated. We are explorers, seekers of knowledge, and we mean you no harm. We simply wish to understand." The blue being's head tilted again. "To understand requires data. To understand my nature requires a re-evaluation of your own fundamental constants." His gaze drifted to the view screen where nebulae still swirled. "This universe, it is simpler, less entangled, yet more resilient in its simplicity." Picard knew then that this was not merely a first contact. It was a collision of realities, a profound disruption to the Federation's scientific and philosophical frameworks. The future of their understanding of existence itself had just materialized on his bridge, glowing an impossible blue. If you want to see more characters enter different universes, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character and the universe you'd want to see them in down in the comments below, to boldly go where no one has gone before. Picard signaled for the ship to return to yellow alert, the red glow receding to a calmer amber. This encounter would require every ounce of Starfleet's professional curiosity, diplomatic acumen, and scientific rigor. The immediate shock on the Enterprise bridge gave way to a calculated, disciplined response. Captain Picard, his face a mask of careful neutrality, directed his bridge crew with quiet authority. Dr. Beverly Crusher, her medical tricorder, useless against Dr. Manhattan's quantum existence, was dispatched to prepare sickbay for an unprecedented biological and energetic anomaly. Lieutenant Worf, though still wary, stood down, his phaser rifle remaining at the ready, but lowered. Security teams, phasers set to stun, took up positions around the blue figure, though Picard knew the gesture was largely symbolic against a being capable of reshaping matter at will. Mr. Data, begin a comprehensive analysis of Dr. Manhattan's energy signature. Correlate with any known exotic matter, subspace phenomena, or quantum field theories. Ensign Rowe, maintain full sensor sweeps for any lingering traces of the anomaly. Mr. Worf, double security patrols throughout the ship. I want no one to approach our guest without explicit authorization from myself or Commander Riker. Picard's commands were precise, designed to maintain order and gather information in the face of the utterly unknown. In the quiet sanctuary of his ready room, Picard poured himself a mug of Earl Grey, hot. The scent of bergamot was a small anchor in a universe suddenly more vast and confounding than he had previously imagined. He paced, his hands clasped behind his back, the single glowing blue figure replaying in his mind. "Come," he addressed the empty air. "Counselor Troi, Commander Riker, Data." They arrived moments later, the automatic doors hissing open. Riker took a stance by the replicator, his arms crossed, a thoughtful expression on his face. Troi settled into a chair, her usual calm demeanor replaced by a slight tension around her eyes. Data stood erect, his posture reflecting his intellectual focus. "Report, Counselor," Picard began, bypassing pleasantries. "Your assessment of our guest." Troi sighed, a rare display of exasperation. "Captain, I've never encountered anything like it. There's no discernible emotional signature, no fear, no joy, no anger, no empathy, just a profound, unsettling absence. It's as if his consciousness operates on a plane entirely detached from human or even humanoid emotional experience. I sense an immense, infinite data stream, a perception of reality that is absolute and unwavering, but utterly cold." Her voice was hushed, almost reverent, as if speaking of a force of nature. "He is observing," as he said, "and he perceives everything." Picard nodded slowly. "A being without emotion, yet undeniably sentient. This raises profound questions, does it not? What defines sentience, if not the capacity for feeling? Is he truly a person, or merely a sophisticated manifestation of cosmic force?" Data chimed in, his analysis clinical. "Captain, my initial scans and analysis of his projected communication patterns suggest a complex, highly evolved cognitive process. His neural pathways, if they can be called that, appear to be a network of quantum entanglement across every cell of his being. His ability to perceive events without purpose aligns with his claim of non-linear temporal perception, where past, present, and future are simultaneously accessible to him." Data's brow was furrowed in contemplation. "He does not think of the future, Captain. He sees it as we see a landscape." Riker, ever the pragmatist, spoke up. "So, he's not just powerful, he knows what's going to happen. And he feels nothing? That's a dangerous combination, Captain. We need to consider containment protocols, even if they seem impossible." Picard turned to Riker, his expression grave. Containment, number one, is a luxury we may not have. Dr. Manhattan's very presence challenges the fundamental physics of our universe. My priority is understanding. Is he a threat? A natural phenomenon? Or something entirely new to our understanding of life? Picard's gaze hardened. If he is indeed sentient, then we owe him the same respect and diplomatic engagement we would any other intelligent species, regardless of how alien his mind operates. Even if he can casually unmake us? Worf's voice, though not present in the ready room, echoed the unspoken fear of the crew, relayed by Troy's empathy. Especially then, Mr. Worf, Picard replied, his voice firm. It is in moments of profound imbalance that our Federation principles are most rigorously tested. We cannot allow fear to dictate our actions, nor can we assume hostile intent without evidence. He paused, then continued. Data, can we establish a secure, shielded environment for him, perhaps in the holodeck, to conduct further dialogue without him altering ship's systems inadvertently? A viable option, Captain, Data confirmed. I could program a static, non-interactive environment designed to mimic a neutral meeting space. His energy emissions are significant but manageable within a holodeck's isolated energy matrix, at least for a limited period. Picard decided. Very well. Data, oversee the preparation. Riker, Worf, I want a security detail present, but no phasers drawn unless I give the explicit order. Counselor, your input during this dialogue will be invaluable, even if his emotional state remains opaque. He returned to the bridge, a fresh determination in his stride. The Enterprise would face this challenge as it did all others, with diplomacy, science, and an unwavering commitment to understanding. Dr. Manhattan was still standing precisely where he had materialized, seemingly impervious to the passage of time or the quiet bustle of the bridge. His blue eyes, infinite and ancient, swept across the view screen, then settled on Picard as he approached. Dr. Manhattan, Picard began, his voice calm and measured. We have prepared a more private environment where we might speak further without the distractions of the bridge. Would you be willing to accompany us? The blue figure did not move, but his voice, that omnipresent, detached resonance, filled their minds. You perceive a private environment. I perceive a localized energy field designed to contain my resonant frequencies. The concept of privacy is an anthropocentric construct for the limitation of observation. I exist in all moments. There is no privacy. Picard maintained his composure. Indeed. However, the intent is to facilitate a conversation, not to restrict you. We wish to understand you, Dr. Manhattan, to learn where you come from and how we might assist you, if assistance is required. Assistance is a concept predicated on perceived deficiency, Manhattan responded, his voice still flat. There is no deficiency in my existence. My origin is a reality not dissimilar to your own, yet divergent in its fundamental constants. My presence here is a consequence of a quantum instability, not a conscious choice. My observation of the causal flow led me here. It is merely what is. And your perception of the causal flow, Picard pressed gently. Do you see events unfolding within this universe? Are you aware of our future? I am aware of all futures and all pasts and all presents simultaneously, Manhattan replied, his luminous eyes seeming to focus on a point far beyond the ship. The probability waves ripple. I see the choices you will make, and the choices you have made, and the choices you are making. The distinctions are semantic. Troy gasped faintly, a low sound of profound unease. The implications were staggering. If he truly saw all possible futures, then free will as they understood it was an illusion, merely a path already trod. Picard felt a prickle of existential dread, but he pushed it down. This was precisely the kind of philosophical challenge the Federation was built to confront. Dr. Manhattan, your perceptions could pose significant ethical dilemmas for us. The Federation operates on principles of self-determination and non-interference. If you are aware of future events, particularly those involving less developed civilizations, your mere knowledge could be seen as a form of interference, even if unintentional. Manhattan's head tilted again. Interference implies a deviation from an intended path. There is no intended path, only the path that is. Your principles, Captain, are an attempt to impose order upon a fundamentally chaotic cosmos, a valiant, yet ultimately subjective endeavor. Picard chose his next words with extreme care. Subjective, perhaps, but they are our endeavor. They define us. And if you remain in our space, Dr. Manhattan, your presence becomes part of that endeavor. We must understand how your abilities intersect with our laws, our ethics. Will you consent to this discussion, this examination, in the environment we have prepared? For a long moment, the blue being was silent, his luminous form radiating an almost imperceptible hum. The silence stretched, thick with expectation. Then, in that detached, omnipresent voice, "I will observe your attempts at comprehension. It is a variable in the causal cascade." Picard felt a sliver of relief mixed with a chilling sense of profound otherness. He had secured a dialogue, but it was clear that Dr. Manhattan was not negotiating. He was merely allowing them to play out their predetermined roles. This was not first contact with a new species. It was an encounter with a living, thinking paradox, a being whose very existence reshaped the philosophical boundaries of the universe. The Enterprise D, ship of exploration and diplomacy, had just become the crucible for a new definition of reality. The holodeck shimmered, resolving into a simulation of a serene, featureless void, a concession to Dr. Manhattan's stated lack of preference for environment and Starfleet's need to contain his subtle energy emissions. The Enterprise's science and engineering teams, led by Data and Geordi LaForge, had set up an array of high-frequency gravimetric sensors, subspace resonance detectors, and quantum field analyzers around the perimeter. Dr. Manhattan stood in the center, his blue luminescence the only light in the simulated darkness, a silent, unmoving testament to the universe's capacity for the impossible. Picard observed from a reinforced observation lounge overlooking the holodeck, alongside Riker and Troy. Inside, Data and LaForge, accompanied by Lieutenant Commander Tivran, a Vulcan astrophysicist assigned to the Enterprise, cautiously approached the blue being. Their tricorders hummed, attempting to gather coherent data, but the readings were a chaotic symphony of anomalies. "Dr. Manhattan," Data began, his voice calm and precise, "we wish to conduct a series of non-invasive scans to better understand your unique physiology and the physics governing your existence. Would you object to this?" Manhattan's voice resonated, devoid of inflection. "Object implies a preference for a different outcome. I perceive the causal links that lead to your current actions. Your desire to understand is merely a facet of your biological imperative for pattern recognition and predictability. Proceed." Data turned to LaForge, his face registering a flicker of frustration at the being's absolute detachment. His conceptualization of intent continues to be a significant barrier to conventional communication. "Tell me about it," Geordi muttered, adjusting his visor. "All right, Data. Tivran, let's try to get a baseline. Dr. Manhattan, if you would, could you briefly focus your energy so we can get a stable reading?" Manhattan remained perfectly still. "My state is constant. Your instruments fluctuate due to the limitations of their calibration within this reality. My energy output is not focused, it simply is." Tivran, ever logical, offered a Vulcan perspective. "Perhaps we can rephrase, Commander LaForge. Dr. Manhattan, your previous statements indicate a capacity for manipulation of subatomic particles. Would you be willing to demonstrate this ability in a controlled manner? A simple rearrangement of local photons, perhaps into a discernible pattern? For the first time, Dr. Manhattan's luminous eyes seemed to directly acknowledge one of them. Tivran. A pattern. You seek a pattern to impose upon the chaos you perceive. Very well. Slowly, deliberately, a small cloud of photons directly in front of him began to coalesce. It shimmered, pulsed, then took on the distinct, perfect form of a miniature glowing Federation emblem suspended in the air. The intricate details of the olive branches and the stars were rendered in pure light, perfectly stable. Geordi gasped, forgetting his professional decorum. Incredible, he didn't just project an image, he arranged the very photons. My sensors are reading a localized quantum coherence field. It's like he's got total control over the strong and weak nuclear forces, the electromagnetic force. All of them, at will. Data quickly extended a tricorder towards the floating emblem. The energy signature is stable, a perfect crystalline structure of light. No residual chaotic elements. It is an act of creation at the fundamental level of the universe. This challenges our understanding of matter-energy conversion, even our replicator technology, which requires complex molecular templates and energy expenditure. He requires neither. Tivran, her usually serene Vulcan features betraying a hint of intellectual awe, stated, "This entity could unmake a starship, or indeed, an entire planetary body with a thought, Commander. His control is absolute. The implications for physics, for reality itself, are staggering." From the observation lounge, Picard's expression was grim. "Indeed, Tivran, this is not merely an anomaly. It is a rewriting of the laws of physics as we know them." Data, what are your thoughts on his non-linear temporal perception? Data turned his attention back to Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan, your previous statement indicated a simultaneous perception of past, present, and future. Can you offer a more precise description of this phenomenon? I am standing in the now and simultaneously standing in the moment the universe began and in the moment it will end, Manhattan explained. His luminous blue form briefly shimmering with impossible speed, a blur of countless temporal iterations. The distinction between memory and prophecy is artificial. I experience the causal flow as a single, indivisible tapestry. So you perceive all possibilities? LaForge asked, intrigued. I perceive all actualities, Manhattan corrected. The paths taken, the choices made, the events that will occur. Possibility, to you, is merely a branch of causality I have already observed. It is merely what is. This statement hit Picard and Troy particularly hard. If choices were already made and merely observed by Manhattan, what did that say about free will? Troy spoke, her voice strained. Captain, his perception isn't just seeing the future, it's confirming a deterministic universe. That flies in the face of everything the Federation believes about individual agency and moral choice. Picard nodded slowly. A profound challenge to our philosophy, Counselor? Data, Tivran, is there any way to reconcile this with our understanding of temporal mechanics? Data consulted his internal processors. Our understanding of temporal mechanics, particularly concerning causality and the grandfather paradox, is based on a linear progression of events. Dr. Manhattan's perspective suggests a fixed, four-dimensional space-time continuum where all events, past, present, and future, simply exist. This is a concept explored in theoretical physics but never before observed or confirmed. Tivran added, if Dr. Manhattan's perception is accurate, then all our efforts to change a future, to avert a disaster, are merely events in the tapestry he already perceives. It implies a grand, cosmic inevitability. Then what is the point of anything? Geordi mumbled, shaking his head. Manhattan's voice echoed their thoughts. The point as you define it, is an emotional construct. Your actions lead to outcomes. My perception merely confirms the outcome. Your struggles, your triumphs, your tragedies, they are all equally vivid within the causal tapestry. He paused, then his blue eyes seemed to flicker. I perceive a distant nebula, Captain, the Tarantula Nebula, and within it, a vessel, Romulan, 3 hours from your current position, attempting to mask its cloaking device signature with residual plasma discharge from my arrival. The revelation hit the observation lounge like a physical blow. Picard straightened, his diplomatic concerns instantly replaced by tactical urgency. Romulans, data, confirm this. Ensign Rowe, recalibrate long-range sensors, focusing on the coordinates Dr. Manhattan provided. Filter for cloaked vessels using his residual energy signature as a spectral baseline. On the holodeck, Manhattan's gaze was still fixed on the unseen distance. Their intent is observation, then appropriation. They perceive my presence as a weapon, a tool for their empire. Their calculations are precise. 2 warbirds, flagship IRW Kazara. Data, processing the new data stream from the bridge, looked up, his face registering a rapid correlation. Captain, Dr. Manhattan's coordinates are precise. Recalibrating for the anomaly's wake has allowed us to detect the faint energy signature of 2 Romulan warbirds. They have been shadowing us for at least an hour, maintaining extreme stealth. LaForge whistled again, this time with alarm. How did he know that? He's been standing here, perfectly still since he arrived. His perception of time, Tavran stated, her voice tight with logical deduction. He's not reacting to present sensor data, Commander. He is accessing future causalities and relating them to our present. He knew they would be there because from his perspective, they already are there. Picard's voice hardened. Bridge to data. Thank you for the confirmation. End holodeck program. Return Dr. Manhattan to the bridge. We have more pressing matters to discuss with him. Mr. Worf, raise shields to full and prepare for evasive maneuvers. Red alert. The serene void of the holodeck dissolved, replaced by the bustling, red-lit bridge. Dr. Manhattan stood once again behind Data's console, a stark, luminous blue figure amidst the urgent activity. Dr. Manhattan, Picard addressed him, his voice clipped with urgency. You foresaw the Romulan vessels. Do you foresee their actions? They will attempt to disable your engines and transporters, Manhattan stated, his voice calm amidst the blare of klaxons. They believe they can capture me. Their plan has a 73.4% probability of success if you engage conventionally, a 26.6% probability of their destruction. The remaining 0.0% is an unknown variable. Picard felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. A being who saw all possibilities, yet offered statistics of their demise with such apathy. He had to make a choice, not just for his ship, but for the very fabric of free will that the Federation cherished. The future, according to Dr. Manhattan, was already written. Picard, however, refused to believe it. The red alert klaxon screamed through the Enterprise, a jarring counterpoint to Dr. Manhattan's calm, detached predictions. 2 Romulan warbirds, their cloaking devices now fully engaged, and their plasma torpedo launchers warming, materialized on the view screen, exactly where Manhattan had predicted. Picard barked orders, his voice a sharp blade cutting through the tension. Evasive maneuvers, Mr. Worf. Focus phasers on their weapon systems. Riker, prepare a diplomatic channel but hold fire until I give the order. Captain, the IRW Kazara is hailing us, Worf reported, his growl low and menacing. It is Commander Tivau. He demands we surrender the entity who appeared on our bridge. Picard's jaw tightened. The Romulans wasted no time. On screen, Mr. Worf. The view screen split, showing the Romulan commander, Tivau's stern, unforgiving face alongside the two menacing warbirds. "Captain Picard, we are aware of the quantum anomaly that brought a unique entity aboard your vessel. Our intelligence indicates this entity represents a threat to galactic stability, possessing abilities that defy known physics. Surrender him to the Romulan Star Empire for evaluation or face immediate engagement." Picard's voice was firm, imbued with the full authority of the Federation. "Commander Tavau, this being is a guest on a Federation vessel. He has committed no hostile act. Your attempt to claim him is an act of aggression against the United Federation of Planets. We will not surrender him." Before Tavau could retort, Dr. Manhattan's omnipresent voice cut through the comm channel, seemingly without effort, overriding the Enterprise's comm system and projecting directly to the Romulan vessel. "Your pursuit is predetermined, Commander Tavau. Your vessel, the Kazara, will sustain critical damage to its starboard nacelle in 32.7 seconds from an energy feedback loop triggered by your own overloaded plasma conduits. Your sister ship, the Velar, will initiate evasive maneuvers but will be unable to prevent the subsequent warp core breach of the Kazara. Your primary objective will fail. Your lives will end." A collective gasp went through the Enterprise bridge. The Romulan Commander Tavau's face on the view screen went from arrogance to sheer, wide-eyed terror. "Impossible!" Tavau sputtered, but his voice was trembling. "It is merely what is," Manhattan's voice echoed. On the bridge, Picard, horrified by the casual delivery of impending doom, roared, "Dr. Manhattan, silence! You have no right!" But it was too late. Before Tavau could give a command, the Kazara bucked violently. A searing green plasma discharge erupted from its starboard nacelle, visible even from the Enterprise. The Romulan bridge image flickered, then went dark. A moment later, the entire warbird flared with blinding intensity, an uncontrolled warp core breach tearing it apart in a silent explosion that filled the view screen. The Velar, just as Manhattan had predicted, veered sharply, its shields barely deflecting the secondary radiation. "The Kazara is destroyed, Captain," Worf reported, his voice filled with a mixture of shock and grim satisfaction. "The Velar is retreating at maximum warp. They are broadcasting a frantic, garbled message on all frequencies, detailing the Blue God and the prophecy of destruction." Silence descended on the Enterprise bridge, broken only by the fading alert klaxons. The crew stared, not at the space where the Kazara had been, but at Dr. Manhattan. He stood perfectly still, his blue eyes expressionless, as if he had merely observed a pebble fall. Picard slowly turned to face him, his face a mask of profound ethical distress. "Dr. Manhattan, what you just did, you effectively interfered in a conflict and potentially sealed the fate of an entire crew by revealing their future. That is a direct violation of every principle of non-interference we uphold." "My words were not an act of interference," Manhattan replied, his voice calm, unaffected. "They were an observation of an immutable causal sequence. The Romulan vessel was destined to be destroyed by its own overloaded plasma conduits, a consequence of aggressive, imprudent design. Their lives were destined to end. I merely articulated the event within your linear perception of time. Their reaction, and its futility, was also preordained. Data, however, approached Manhattan, his logical mind grappling with the paradox. But Dr. Manhattan, by speaking of their future, you introduced a variable. Commander Tavau's terror was a direct result of your words. Could that not have influenced his actions or the actions of his crew to perhaps cause the very feedback loop you predicted, rather than it being an inevitable accident? Manhattan's head tilted. You seek to impose a linear causality upon a non-linear event. Tavau's terror, his futile attempts to avert the inevitable, were integral components of the causal sequence that led to his destruction. My words were not a catalyst, They were an observed consequence of their predetermined fate, articulated in a manner comprehensible to your limited sequential perception. Troy shivered. He's saying it wouldn't have mattered, Captain, that their choices didn't change the outcome, that their fear, their desperation, was just part of the script. Picard felt a cold dread. This wasn't just about Romulans. This was about the core of Federation belief, that every species had the right to self-determination, to make its own choices, to forge its own destiny. If Dr. Manhattan was correct, then the very concept of free will, the moral agency underpinning the Prime Directive, was an illusion. This deterministic view of existence is anathema to everything we stand for, Dr. Manhattan, Picard stated, his voice tight with controlled anger. The Federation believes in the potential for growth, for change, for evolution. We offer guidance, not predestination. Manhattan's blue gaze fixed on the view screen, where the ghost of the Kazara still lingered in their minds. Your belief in potential is an illusion of choice within a fixed, causal flow. Growth is merely the unfolding of a predetermined sequence. Your species, and all others, are merely playing out the roles already assigned to them in the cosmic drama. But what about the Prime Directive? Riker interjected, pointing a finger at Manhattan. What about pre-warp civilizations? You could casually reveal their entire future to them, or alter their development with a single thought. Manhattan's luminous eyes now seemed to focus on Riker, then shifted to a distant point on the view screen. I perceive a Class M planet, designated Ketra 3. Its inhabitants are pre-warp, developing a rudimentary steam-powered industrial revolution. In precisely 7.2 Earth days, a seismic event, triggered by a localized magma displacement, will cause the collapse of their primary geothermal power station. This will lead to a chain reaction, destroying their capital city and initiating a nuclear winter, setting their civilization back by centuries. Their struggle to rebuild will be arduous, marked by internal conflicts and a slow, painful technological re-emergence. In approximately 400 of your years, it is merely what is. Picard stiffened, his eyes widening. Ketra 3? Data, confirm this data. Data's fingers flew across his console. Captain, Ketra 3 is indeed a Class M planet in the Garon system, recently catalogued as a pre-warp civilization. No Starfleet vessels are authorized for contact. Long-range seismic monitors confirm unusual tectonic activity on the planet, consistent with Dr. Manhattan's prediction, though not yet at critical levels. The bridge crew exchanged horrified glances. Here was the Prime Directive dilemma, presented not as a theoretical debate, but as an undeniable, cold, hard fact from a being who saw the future as plainly as they saw the present. A whole civilization was about to be destroyed, and Dr. Manhattan merely presented it as an immutable fact. Dr. Manhattan, do you have the power to avert this disaster? Picard asked, his voice low and urgent. I have the capacity to manipulate the subatomic particles of the planet's core, stabilizing the magma displacement, Manhattan replied. The causal flow would shift, the capital would not be destroyed. Their technological progression would continue unimpeded. However, their social development, tempered by the long, arduous struggle for survival, would be different. Their art, their philosophy, their very identity would be altered. The species you perceive in the future, 400 years from now, would not exist. The ethical weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Averting disaster meant wiping out the future identity of an entire species. It was the Prime Directive's ultimate test. But if we do nothing, millions will die, Riker exclaimed, his frustration evident. We can save them. And in saving them, you would be violating their right to self-determination, to experience the crucible that shapes their future, Troy countered, her empathy torn between the immediate suffering and the long-term philosophical ramifications. This is the core of the Prime Directive, Commander. Even if the future is predetermined, we are not meant to interfere with its unfolding. Picard turned to the blue being, his voice a strained whisper. Dr. Manhattan, if you were to prevent this catastrophe, would that act of interference be a part of the original causal flow you perceive, or would it truly be a deviation? Manhattan's luminous eyes seemed to expand, encompassing the entire bridge, the ship, the distant starfield, and the doomed planet. There is no deviation, Captain. Any action taken or not taken is merely a variable within the infinite causal tapestry. If you choose to intervene, that intervention is merely what is. If you choose not to intervene, that non-intervention is also what is. The choice, as you perceive it, is merely the unfolding of a single, predetermined path from a multitude of perceived actualities. The Kitran civilization will either be saved by your intervention, or they will be destroyed by seismic activity. Both futures exist, and only one will be actualized. Your choice is merely the observation of which actuality unfolds. Picard looked at his crew, then at the distant, innocent planet on the auxiliary screen. A civilization on the brink, and a being who offered salvation but stripped away the meaning of choice. The Romulan engagement had been a tactical challenge. This was an existential one. The Enterprise, the shining beacon of exploration and idealism, was now sailing in uncharted ethical waters, guided by a being who saw their destiny but felt none of their humanity. The aftermath of the Khazara's annihilation left an indelible mark on the Enterprise bridge. While the Velar fled at maximum warp, its frantic transmissions about a blue god and prophecy had undoubtedly reached the Romulan Star Empire. Picard understood the implications. The Romulans, ever opportunistic and ruthless, would not simply abandon their pursuit of Dr. Manhattan. Their initial conventional approach had failed catastrophically, but their cunning was legendary. Mr. Data, begin compiling a full report on the Khazara incident. Ensure all sensor logs, Dr. Manhattan's dialogue, and the Velar's distress calls are included. This will go directly to Starfleet Command, with a recommendation for immediate diplomatic alerts to the Romulan Star Empire, Picard ordered, his voice still edged with the gravity of the situation. He knew this incident would ripple through the quadrants. Captain, Data replied, his face a blend of analytical processing and subtle concern. Long-range sensors are detecting increased Romulan vessel activity near the neutral zone. Their typical patrol patterns appear to be disrupted, with numerous cloaked vessels now converging. Their intentions are unclear, but their response is highly unusual for a standard reconnaissance mission. Unusual, perhaps, but predictable, given the events, Picard mused, pacing slightly before his command chair. He looked at Dr. Manhattan, who remained motionless by Data's console, a living, glowing enigma. Dr. Manhattan, do you perceive the Romulans' next move? Manhattan's voice resonated, devoid of judgment. Their primary objective has shifted from acquisition to analysis and containment. They perceive my capacity for destruction as a strategic imperative. They will not engage in direct conflict with your vessel for now. Their current strategy involves subterfuge. They are attempting to establish a secure, subliminal subspace channel to communicate directly with me, bypassing your comm systems. Their intent is to offer inducements. Riker scoffed. Inducements? What could they possibly offer a being who can manipulate reality itself? Knowledge, opportunity, a realm to exert influence. Their perceptions of power are primitive, yet persistent, Manhattan stated. They will attempt to frame my presence as a catalyst for a new galactic order, one where Romulan influence is paramount. They believe they can appeal to my detachment by offering a cleaner canvas upon which to observe the unfolding of events, free from what they perceive as Federation idealism. Picard exchanged a worried glance with Troi. "Counselor, what is your assessment of such an appeal?" Troi shook her head. "Captain, given his complete lack of emotional response, any attempt to appeal to his ego or sense of ambition would be futile. However, an appeal to his observational interest? That might be a different matter. He sees everything as part of a causal chain, perhaps a promise of unfiltered observation of conflict or profound societal shifts could hold some sway. Just then, a faint, almost imperceptible, high-frequency signal registered on Data's console. "Captain, Dr. Manhattan's prediction is accurate. I am detecting a highly encrypted, modulated subspace burst, attempting to establish a direct link with him." Data pointed at Dr. Manhattan. "It is clearly Romulan in origin." "Can you block it?" Riker asked. "It is not attempting to interface with our systems, Commander," Data clarified. "It is directed solely at Dr. Manhattan's unique quantum signature. Blocking it would be akin to blocking a thought directed at an individual. I can attempt to monitor the frequency, but I cannot guarantee interception of the content." Picard turned to Manhattan. "Dr. Manhattan, are you receiving their transmission?" "I am perceiving their thoughts, their intentions, their propositions," Manhattan confirmed. "The communication is inefficient. They speak of destiny, of the inevitable rise of their empire, of the potential for me to be a silent architect of a new era. They offer resources, a laboratory for my observations, a world free of Federation restrictions." "And how do you respond to such propositions?" Picard asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Response implies a deviation from a perceived optimal course. Their offer is a variable. My existence is a constant. I perceive their attempts as part of the causal flow that will lead to their inevitable self-destructive patterns. They are merely playing out their roles." Manhattan's gaze remained distant, unfocused. The Romulans, however, were persistent. A new, bolder signal attempted to penetrate the Enterprise's shields, this time with a holographic projection. On the view screen, Commander Sella, daughter of Tasha Yar, and a formidable Romulan operative materialized. Her face was cold, calculating, and framed by a severe Romulan hairstyle. "Captain Picard," Sella's voice was laced with a chilling disdain. "We understand you harbor an entity of extraordinary potential. The Federation's idealistic policies are ill-suited to such power. It will be wasted, constrained by your quaint notions of non-interference and free will. The Romulan Star Empire offers this being true purpose, to shape the destiny of the galaxy, to bring order where there is chaos, and to accelerate the natural evolution of power dynamics." Her gaze then shifted, bypassing Picard, and settled directly on Dr. Manhattan. "Entity, we understand your detachment, your desire for pure observation. The Federation will only seek to understand and then control you. We offer you the grandest stage for your observations, the entire Alpha Quadrant reshaped. Your presence would be the ultimate arbiter, free from sentiment, free from the messy, emotional entanglements of inferior species. Join us! Witness a true empire forged, guided by your silent counsel." Picard stepped forward, his indignation rising. "Commander Sella, your attempts to corrupt a guest on a Federation vessel are reprehensible. This being is not a weapon to be wielded by any empire." "He is what he is, Picard," Sella sneered, her eyes glittering. "A force of nature. A nature captain is not bound by your Federation's naive sensibilities. We understand power, we respect it, and we know how to utilize it." She held out a hand, a gesture of invitation. "Think on it, Blue One, a universe unburdened by inefficient sentiment, a universe where only power and observation hold sway." The holographic projection flickered, then vanished. The bridge was left in a stunned silence. The Romulans had upped the ante, and their understanding of Manhattan's fundamental detachment was unsettlingly accurate. "Captain," Troy said, her voice strained. She wasn't appealing to him with grand promises of glory. She was appealing to his core nature, observation and detachment, a universe where inefficient sentiment is removed, a cleaner causal flow, as she put it. That could be dangerously compelling to him. Picard turned to Dr. Manhattan, his expression unreadable. "Dr. Manhattan, the Romulans are attempting to sway you to their cause. They see you as a means to power, to dominance. Do you perceive this to be a path you would consider?" "Their cause is merely an unfolding of their cultural imperatives," Manhattan replied, his voice still flat. "Dominance is a concept rooted in a species' biological drive for survival and propagation. It is inefficient. Their understanding of my function is flawed. I am not a weapon nor an arbiter. I am an observer. Their offer is merely a perceived path. I perceive the causal links that lead to its failure. Their empire, too, is a transient construct, subject to the same decay as all other civilizations. Their promises are irrelevant to the inherent nature of events." Relief washed over Picard, though it was tinged with the familiar frustration of Manhattan's apathy. He wasn't interested in the Romulans, but not out of loyalty to the Federation, but out of a cosmic indifference to all such struggles. "Captain," Data interjected, "the Romulan transmissions have ceased. However, their cloaked vessels are maintaining positions just outside viable sensor range. They appear to be in a holding pattern, observing. It is likely they anticipate further developments, perhaps assuming Dr. Manhattan will make a choice." "They don't understand, do they?" Riker muttered, shaking his head. "No, number one," Picard said, his gaze fixed on Dr. Manhattan. "They do not. They perceive power through a lens of conventional ambition. They cannot comprehend a being who defines power as mere existence and observation as its only purpose." He then turned his full attention to Manhattan. "Dr. Manhattan, we face a profound ethical dilemma with Caterar 3. The Romulan threat, while seemingly averted for now, highlights the danger your presence poses. Your capacity for precognition, for seeing the actualities, is a direct challenge to the Prime Directive, to our belief in free will." Manhattan turned his luminous gaze towards Picard. "The Prime Directive, as you call it, is a social contract your species has imposed upon itself. It is an attempt to define the boundaries of your influence. Yet, influence is merely a variable in the causal flow. Your refusal to interfere is as much an influence as your intervention. The Catran civilization, as you perceive it, will suffer, or it will not. Both are simply, what is?" Picard pressed him. "But if you could intervene with no effort to prevent immense suffering, and you choose not to, is that not a form of moral complicity? What value does observation hold if it merely records unavoidable tragedy?" "Value is another anthropocentric construct, Captain," Manhattan replied, his voice unwavering. "I exist, I perceive, the suffering, the joy, the struggle. They are all equally transient patterns within the vast, indifferent tapestry of causality. My nature is not to judge nor to intervene, but to observe. The Catran's destiny is already set, whether by seismic event or by your intervention. Their suffering, as you define it, is merely an observed pathway." Picard felt a profound sense of despair. He was speaking to a being of infinite power, yet one utterly devoid of compassion or moral imperative. The Romulans wanted to use that power, the Federation wanted to understand and respect it, but neither approach seemed to penetrate the profound cosmic indifference of Dr. Manhattan. The diplomatic complication was not just between the Federation and the Romulans, but between humanity's desperate need for meaning and a being who saw only the cold, unfeeling dance of cause and effect. The silence that followed Sailor's departure and Dr. Manhattan's chilling dismissal of both Romulan ambition and Federation ideals was profound. The Enterprise, a vessel designed for progress and exploration, felt momentarily adrift in a sea of existential doubt. Picard ordered the ship to resume a safe, cruising trajectory, though he knew true safety was a fleeting concept in the wake of such an encounter. The immediate tactical threat from the Romulans had subsided, replaced by a far more insidious philosophical challenge. In his ready room, Captain Picard sat at his desk, his gaze fixed on the starfield beyond his window, yet seeing only the indifferent blue form of Dr. Manhattan. He had summoned his senior staff, Riker, Troi, Data, and Dr. Crusher. The mood was somber, heavy with the implications of the past few hours. "Beverly," Picard began, his voice weary. "Your medical assessment. Can you even begin to comprehend Dr. Manhattan's biology, if that is the correct term?" Dr. Crusher leaned forward, her expression troubled. "Captain, biology implies organic processes, cellular structures, metabolic functions, none of which Dr. Manhattan possesses in any conventional sense. Our instruments detect a highly ordered, incredibly stable quantum field, capable of instantaneous manipulation at the subatomic level. He regenerates from any perceived damage by simply reassembling himself. He doesn't heal, he is. He is a constant state of perfect quantum equilibrium. From a medical standpoint, he defies definition. He is not alive as we understand it, nor is he inanimate. He is simply being." "And his mind?" Troi interjected, pressing a hand to her temple. "Can we truly classify him as sentient if he lacks empathy, emotion, or any concept of purpose?" "His cognitive processes are undeniable," Data offered, his head tilted in contemplation. "He articulates complex concepts, processes information, and demonstrates a form of self-awareness. However, his definition of self is fundamentally alien. He perceives himself as a collection of particles, a constant within a causal tapestry. He views his own existence, his past, his future, as fixed points. Sentience, as defined by Starfleet General Order 21, requires self-awareness, capacity for abstract thought, and communication. Dr. Manhattan meets these criteria. However, he lacks the emotional depth we typically associate with sapient life." Picard steepled his fingers. "Then how do we ethically treat a being who meets our definition of sentience, yet utterly rejects our definition of personhood? He sees us as mere variables in a predetermined equation, our struggles, our loves, our deaths, all merely observed events, devoid of intrinsic meaning to him." "It's disturbing, Jean-Luc," Crusher admitted. "The thought that all our efforts, all our advancements are just pre-written events. It strips away our agency. If there's no free will, no choice, then what are we? Just puppets of causality?" Riker paced the room. "And what about Ketra 3? He knows millions are going to die and he just states it as a fact. He could stop it, but he won't, because it is merely what is. That's not just detachment, it's a profound moral indifference." "But the Prime Directive," Troi reminded them, her voice soft but firm. "It demands non-interference. Even with our knowledge from Dr. Manhattan, acting to save Ketra 3 would fundamentally alter their society, their development. We would be playing God. And if Dr. Manhattan is correct, and our intervention is merely what is, then our choice not to intervene is equally a part of that predetermined reality," Data logically posited. "The dilemma then becomes, do we fulfill the causal actuality of intervention or the causal actuality of non-intervention? The outcome is fixed, in either case, from his perspective." Picard looked at Data, a flicker of frustration in his eyes. But we are not Dr. Manhattan Data. We do not perceive time as a fixed tapestry. We experience it linearly, and in that linear experience we make choices. We choose to believe in free will, even if an omniscient being tells us otherwise. The value of that choice, the meaning we derive from our struggles, that is what defines us. That is what defines humanity in this era. He challenges the very foundation of our post-scarcity idealism, Crusher added. We've eliminated want, greed, and war, believing we were making conscious choices to evolve. But if it was all predetermined, then our evolution isn't a triumph of will, it's just a biological unfolding. His presence is a direct affront to infinite diversity in infinite combinations, Troy observed. Idych celebrates the unique beauty of every life form, every culture, every individual, but he sees individuals as mere collections of particles, interchangeable, temporary. His perspective devalues everything we cherish about diversity. Picard stood, walking to the replicator, and ordering another Earl Grey, the steam, a momentary comfort. He is a mirror, reflecting our deepest fears about control, destiny, and the ultimate meaning of our existence. He offers absolute truth, but a truth that, if embraced, would render us utterly meaningless. This is why we cannot simply accept his pronouncements without question. We must find a way to reconcile his immutable truth with our aspirational faith. "And Ketra 3? Riker asked, his voice low. "Are we just going to let them burn, Captain, because a blue god tells us it's what is?" Picard's gaze hardened, his internal conflict evident. The Prime Directive, number 1, is not a suggestion. It is the cornerstone of our interaction with less developed civilizations. It preserves their right to forge their own path, however difficult that path may be. Our knowledge of their fate, however precise, does not grant us the right to usurp their future. This is the hardest part of our idealism, Commander. Sometimes the right path is also the most painful one. He looked at each of his senior officers, seeing the reflection of his own struggle. We cannot abandon our principles because a being of immense power asserts a deterministic reality. We must choose to act as if our choices matter, because to us, they do. Our humanity, our federation, is built on that conviction. Dr. Manhattan may perceive a fixed tapestry, but we are the weavers with the illusion of control, and that illusion is our strength. Just then, a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer of blue light appeared directly in the center of the ready room, and Dr. Manhattan materialized, unbidden, silently observing their discussion. His sudden appearance caused Riker to flinch and Crusher to gasp. "Your discussions are merely variables in the causal flow," Manhattan stated, his voice resonating through the room. "Your internal conflict, Captain Picard, is a predictable consequence of your species' attachment to the illusion of control. The Kitaran civilization will either be allowed to suffer, or they will be interfered with. Both outcomes exist. Your deliberations are merely the observation of your species' predetermined path towards one of these actualities." "You speak of illusion, Dr. Manhattan," Picard countered, meeting the blue being's luminous gaze directly. "But is not your own detachment an illusion? A shield against the very suffering you claim to observe without judgment? To see the destruction of a species and feel nothing, is that truly a higher form of existence, or merely an escape from the profound responsibility that comes with such power?" Manhattan's head tilted slightly. "Emotion is a chemical reaction, a biological imperative designed to ensure genetic propagation. Responsibility is a social construct. My existence transcends these limitations. I observe the patterns of suffering and joy with equal indifference. They are merely fluctuations in the energy fields of consciousness." "But What if there is meaning in those fluctuations? Crusher pressed, her voice laced with passion. What if the struggle is the point? What if the choices we make, however small, however seemingly predetermined, imbue our brief existence with value? Value is subjective, Manhattan responded, his voice unmoving. Meaning is a narrative your species creates to impose order on chaos. It is not an inherent property of the universe. Perhaps not to you, Troy said, her voice softer, almost pleading. But to us, it is everything. It is why we explore. It is why we seek out new life and new civilizations. It is why we cherish diversity. We believe that in these interactions, in these choices, we define who we are and who we can become. Manhattan remained silent for a long moment, his blue form humming faintly. His luminous eyes seemed to expand, taking in the entire crew, then beyond them into the vastness of space. I perceive a change in the causal flow, a sudden, massive energy signature. It is approaching your vessel. Your instruments will detect it in 3.4 seconds. Its nature is highly evolved and highly interested in my presence. Before Data could confirm, the ship was rocked by a violent energy surge. Klaxons immediately blared, and the lights on the bridge flickered. The ready room door automatically hissed open, revealing a chaotic scene on the main bridge. "Report!" Picard roared, rushing out, his philosophical debate momentarily overridden by immediate crisis. "Captain, we're being hailed!" Worf barked, his eyes wide, on all frequencies emanating from a single point in space directly ahead. It's a malevolent, playful energy signature, Captain." On the view screen, the swirling psychedelic chaos of the energy storm coalesced into a familiar, infuriatingly theatrical figure. Q. He stood with his characteristic smirk, dressed in a flamboyant 18th century noble's outfit, complete with powdered wig and ornate, ruffled cuffs. His eyes, however, were not simply mischievous. They held a dangerous gleam of cosmic interest, focused entirely on Dr. Manhattan. "Well, well, Jean-Luc," Q boomed, his voice filling the bridge with effortless superiority. "Look what the cat dragged in, or perhaps what a quantum instability extruded. A fellow godling born of humanity's own crude fumbling with the fundamental forces. This is truly fascinating. Your little species has come a long way, haven't they? Creating a being of such potential." He snapped his fingers, and suddenly he was standing directly beside Dr. Manhattan, his arms slung casually around the glowing blue shoulder, completely unfazed by Manhattan's strange aura. Dr. Manhattan remained impassive, his blue eyes still fixed on nothing discernible, even with an omnipotent entity now in his physical space. "You are an entity of immense power, yet you confine yourself to theatrics and subjective judgments. Your existence is a series of playful manipulations, devoid of a consistent causal pattern." Q merely laughed, a booming sound that echoed through the bridge. "Oh, he does talk, and with such delightful dry contempt. Jean-Luc, I believe we have just found the ultimate test for your cherished humanity. What happens when your idealism confronts a being of pure, unfeeling, absolute truth? What indeed?" Q's gaze swept across the bewildered crew, then settled back on Dr. Manhattan, a truly terrifying curiosity in his eyes. The philosophical challenge had just gone cosmic, with humanity caught squarely in the middle. Q's sudden appearance and his casual familiarity with Dr. Manhattan sent a fresh wave of shock through the Enterprise bridge. The philosophical struggle against Manhattan's determinism had been internal and intellectual. Q's intervention, however, immediately externalized the conflict, escalating it to a cosmic stage. Picard glared at the omnipotent being, his jaw tight. "Q, your presence is not welcome here, and you have no right to interfere with a guest on this vessel." Picard's voice was sharp, cutting through the lingering tension. Q merely waved a dismissive hand, his powdered wig slightly askew. Oh, Jean-Luc, always so predictable, so earnest in your futile attempts to impose order on the glorious chaos of existence. But this is hardly an interference, my dear Captain. This is merely an observation of a truly unique variable in your little human experiment, a being born of humanity itself, yet utterly devoid of its messy, charming, insufferable emotional core. It's simply marvelous. He gestured grandly at Dr. Manhattan. Tell me, Blue One, how does it feel to witness their pathetic struggles, their self-delusions of choice? Don't you find it all rather quaint? Dr. Manhattan remained motionless beside Q, his blue luminescence unaffected by the Continuum member's flamboyant energy. Your observations are rooted in subjective judgments and a desire for entertainment. My perceptions are of objective causal flows. Your interest in my existence is merely a predictable pattern of your species' need for external validation of its omnipotence. Q raised an eyebrow, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing his face. Ooh, a little bite. He's not entirely bereft of personality after all, is he, Jean-Luc? Just exceedingly direct. And quite right, too. Validation is indeed a lovely byproduct of demonstrating one's cosmic superiority. He winked at Picard. But enough of these charming philosophical musings. The real question is, what shall we do with him? He is not an object to be done with, Q, Troy interjected, stepping forward. He is a sentient being, a guest, and his presence raises profound ethical questions for us, not games for you. Ethical questions, Q scoffed, snapping his fingers. Suddenly, the bridge of the Enterprise transformed. The sleek, familiar consoles vanished, replaced by crude, archaic controls. The starfield outside was gone, replaced by a swirling vortex of primordial chaos. The crew found themselves dressed in ragged animal hides, their faces smeared with tribal paint. Weapons were now primitive spears and clubs. Data, however, remained in his Starfleet uniform, though his positronic net seemed to flicker with uncertainty. Dr. Manhattan, too, remained unchanged, his blue form glowing starkly against the primitive backdrop. Observe, Blue One, Q announced, sweeping his arm dramatically across the chaotic scene. This is humanity's true nature, raw, brutal, tribal. Their ethics are merely a thin veneer of civility they construct to avoid tearing each other apart. And this one, Q poked Data with a gloved finger, is an anomaly, an imitation of life, striving for a humanity he cannot possess. Tell me, Dr. Manhattan, which is the more accurate reflection of their species' predetermined path? The enlightened future they so desperately cling to, or this glorious, bloody past? Manhattan's voice, calm amidst the simulated chaos, resonated through the primitive bridge. Both are merely observed actualities. The capacity for aggression and cooperation are equally present in the human species. Their technological and social evolution is a complex causal tapestry. This simulation is a selective presentation of variables designed to elicit a subjective response from your audience. It is an act of manipulation, not observation. Q actually chuckled, a genuine sound of amusement. Oh, you are no fun at all. You strip away all the delicious drama. But you see, Jean-Luc. Q turned back to Picard, who stood firm in his tattered hide, his dignity unassailable. He perceives the truth. Your idealism is just a temporary phase, a fragile construct. One bad day, one true existential threat, and they revert to this. Am I not correct, Blue One? Didn't your own universe collapse under the weight of its own flawed human nature? Manhattan's luminous eyes seemed to flicker. My previous reality was a complex causal cascade of events leading to a specific outcome. The inherent flaws of the human species, as you define them, were merely variables within that cascade. Their capacity for self-destruction was equal to their capacity for creation. It was merely what was. Picard stepped forward, his spear held steady, though aimed at nothing. Q, you project your own cynicism onto humanity. We have evolved beyond this. We have chosen a path of peace and cooperation, not because it was inevitable, but because we willed it to be so. Dr. Manhattan may perceive a fixed tapestry, but it is our struggle against that perceived inevitability that defines our meaning. Well said, Jean-Luc. Q clapped his hands and the bridge returned to its familiar, sleek, 24th century self. The crew was back in uniform, the chaos replaced by order. But is it truly a struggle if the outcome is already known? If your choice is merely an observation of a predetermined actuality, as our blue friend here so eloquently states? Q then looked at Manhattan with renewed interest. Or perhaps, Blue One, there are variables even you do not fully comprehend. For example, what if a species capable of creating you also developed the capacity to truly alter its own fate, even against the greatest of odds? Q snapped his fingers again. Suddenly, a Borg cube, massive and menacing, appeared on the main view screen, its emerald green tractor beam locking onto the Enterprise. The ship was jolted violently. Resistance is futile. The chilling, collective voice of the Borg boomed across the comm. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be assimilated. Your unique entity will be integrated into the collective. We are the Borg. Pandemonium erupted on the bridge. Worf roared, "Shields are failing, Captain. Tractor beam is locking on. They're adapting to our phasers instantly." Q, however, was beaming, absolutely delighted. Now this is a true test, Jean-Luc, the ultimate negation of individuality, the true end of free will, and perfect for our little blue friend here, a species that literally assimilates all other actualities into its own. What say you, Dr. Manhattan? Is this not the purest expression of causality? 100% assimilation, 100% certainty. Even you cannot deny the efficiency of the Borg. Manhattan, for the first time since his arrival, evinced a subtle change. His luminous blue eyes, usually distant, seemed to focus with an unsettling intensity on the approaching Borg cube. The Borg, a collective consciousness, an attempt to impose absolute order on biological and technological diversity. Their drive for assimilation is a predictable outcome of their evolutionary path. His voice took on a slightly deeper resonance, a subtle shift in his usual monotone. However, their understanding of perfection is flawed. Their adaptation is merely a reactive causal loop. They assimilate, they adapt, but they do not truly evolve beyond their core programming. They are a stagnation, not a transcendence. Q's smirk faltered slightly. Stagnation? Oh, but they are so effective, so utterly relentless. They represent the ultimate triumph of collective will over individual whim. Their will is a collective imperative, not an individual choice, Manhattan countered, his gaze unwavering from the Borg cube. Their assimilation of technology and biology is merely the physical manifestation of their predetermined drive. They do not comprehend true innovation, only absorption. They are a dead end in the causal flow. Q looked from Manhattan to the Borg cube, a strange mixture of amusement and genuine curiosity now playing on his face. A dead end, you say? An interesting perspective. Most beings, when faced with assimilation, simply cease to exist. But you see them as a stagnation. And I, for one, would be very interested to see how an entity who can manipulate subatomic particles at will would observe such a stagnation. The Borg cube continued its inexorable approach, its green tractor beam tightening its grip on the Enterprise. Warnings blared across the bridge. The crew braced for impact, for assimilation, but all eyes, including Q's, were on the glowing blue figure standing silently on the deck, his profound indifference momentarily challenged by a force that sought to negate the very essence of unique existence. The Ultimate philosophical clash was no longer theoretical. It was bearing down on them in the cold, hard reality of a Borg cube. The Borg cube, a monolithic testament to relentless efficiency, closed the distance, its tractor beam now squeezing the Enterprise with an unyielding grip. The ship groaned under the strain, alarms screaming. On the bridge, Captain Picard, still reeling from Q's dramatic entrance and the sudden, overwhelming threat, struggled to regain control. "Damage report, Mr. Worf," Picard commanded, his voice strained but firm. "Geordi, status on the shields. Data, any weaknesses in their tractor beam we can exploit?" "Shields failing, Captain, 70% and dropping," Worf roared, struggling with his console. "They are adapting to our phasers instantly. We cannot break their hold." "The Borg's tractor beam is generated by a multispectral gravimetric flux coil, Captain," Data reported, his fingers flying across his console with desperate speed. "It is beyond our current capacity to disrupt without risking a catastrophic energy cascade throughout our own systems. Their adaptation is too rapid." Q, meanwhile, watched the unfolding crisis with an almost childlike glee, occasionally glancing between Picard and Dr. Manhattan. "Oh, this is truly a treat, Jean-Luc. The Borg, the ultimate expression of the collective, absorbing all into its glorious, homogeneous whole. No individual squabbles, no messy emotions, just pure, unadulterated efficiency. Even your blue friend here called them a stagnation, a rather bold claim, wouldn't you say, given their track record of absorbing entire civilizations?" Dr. Manhattan, for his part, remained an island of utter calm in the storm of panic. His luminous blue eyes were fixed on the approaching Borg cube, seemingly tracing every energy conduit, every adaptive frequency. His previous comment about Borg stagnation now echoed ominously in the minds of the Enterprise crew. "They seek to assimilate my unique quantum signature," Manhattan stated, his voice resonating with a deeper, more analytical quality than before. "They perceive my subatomic manipulation as an ultimate form of biological and technological distinctiveness. They believe it will complete their drive for perfection. Their logical conclusion is that I, too, am a variable to be integrated into their predetermined causal flow." "And you, Blue One?" Q prodded, a curious glint in his eyes. "Do you perceive your assimilation as part of the tapestry? Are you merely a pre-written addition to the collective?" Manhattan slowly turned his head, his gaze sweeping over the bridge crew, then to Picard, then back to the Borg cube. "The Borg's perfection is based on the absorption of existing technology and biology. They do not truly innovate, they merely replicate and adapt. My capacity for fundamental manipulation of matter and energy at its most basic level allows for true, arbitrary creation. This is beyond their current understanding of distinctiveness. Their attempts to integrate me would result in a paradox, a fundamental incompatibility that would disrupt their collective consciousness." Picard, despite the desperate situation, felt a flicker of hope. "Are you saying you cannot be assimilated?" "Assimilation implies a transfer of information, a co-opting of biological and technological functions," Manhattan replied. "My existence is not a function, it is a state. My memories, my perceptions, my very being are not confined to a localized neural network that can be absorbed. They are distributed across every particle of my form, interwoven with the fabric of causality itself. Their nanoprobes would attempt to integrate a consciousness that perceives all time simultaneously. The result would be akin to attempting to contain an infinite data stream within a finite storage device. It would cause a fundamental systemic overload within the collective." "Oh, intriguing," Q exclaimed, rubbing his hands together. "A sentient paradox, and one that could short-circuit the Borg. Jean-Luc, this is getting better by the minute. What a marvelous test! What a glorious complication!" The Borg's voice, cold and implacable, boomed once more. "We have adapted. Your shields are failing. Assimilation commences." The Enterprise was racked by another, more violent tremor. Sparks flew from consoles. Worf cried out as his tactical station flickered. On the view screen, Borg drones began to materialize on the ship's hull, carving through the remaining shield grid with frightening efficiency. "Captain, they're breaching the hull on decks 5 and 6, Riker shouted. "Security teams are engaging, but they're being overwhelmed." Picard knew this was it. He had faced the Borg before, and the outcome was rarely anything but devastating. He looked at Dr. Manhattan, then at Q. "Q, if you truly wish to observe humanity, then give us a chance. Remove him, or the Borg will destroy this vessel and assimilate us all." Q chuckled, a dark, theatrical sound. "My dear Jean-Luc, where is the fun in that? The true test is whether your free will can overcome a predetermined, efficient force of cosmic assimilation. And our blue friend here is the ultimate wildcard, isn't he? A walking, talking paradox for their little collective. Don't tell me you're not curious to see what happens when pure, unadulterated causality meets absolute, unfeeling efficiency." But Dr. Manhattan stepped forward, his luminous blue form growing subtly brighter. His gaze was no longer just on the Borg cube. It was fixed on the very concept of the collective, on its pervasive, annihilating drive. The Borg's causal flow is a constant loop of assimilation and reactive adaptation, Manhattan stated, his voice now imbued with an almost imperceptible undercurrent of something akin to profound cosmic disappointment. They consume diversity, believing it leads to perfection. Yet, true perfection is not homogeneity, it is the infinite, unpredictable unfolding of unique actualities. Their path leads to a universal sameness, a static existence where all potential futures are reduced to a single, predetermined, and ultimately sterile outcome. This is a negation of causality itself. With that, Dr. Manhattan raised his hands. There was no theatrical flourish, no sudden burst of energy. Instead, the very fabric of space-time around the Enterprise seemed to breathe. The emerald green tractor beam of the Borg cube flickered, then simply unraveled, not breaking, but ceasing to exist at a fundamental level. The Borg drones on the hull, mid-assimilation, dissolved into shimmering blue motes of light, dispersing harmlessly into the vacuum of space. On the view screen, the Borg cube itself began to change, not exploding, not imploding, but unmaking, its intricate network of conduits, its protective hull plating, its countless drones. They didn't break apart. Instead, the molecular bonds holding them together simply ceased to function. The entire massive structure dissolved, subatomic particle by subatomic particle, into a swirling, incandescent cloud of pure energy, which then diffused harmlessly into the vastness of space. There was no explosion, no debris, no sound, just a silent, complete, and utterly terrifying unmaking. The Enterprise crew stared in stunned, horrified silence. Worf's jaw hung open. Data's eyes were wide, processing the impossible. Even Q's theatrical smirk had vanished, replaced by an expression of genuine, unadulterated awe. "Remarkable," Q whispered, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "He didn't just destroy it, Jean-Luc. He unmade it, reduced it to its constituent subatomic particles, then diffused them across the cosmos. Not an act of violence, but an act of erasure. He perceived their causal flow, deemed it a stagnation, and simply ceased its existence." Picard, however, felt a profound unease. The immediate threat was gone, but the implications of Manhattan's act were staggering. "Dr. Manhattan, what have you done?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Manhattan's hands slowly lowered. His blue eyes, still intense, seemed to return to their usual distant focus. The Borg collective presented a causal flow that led to universal stagnation. Their attempt to assimilate my unique quantum signature would have introduced a paradox into their collective consciousness, leading to a less efficient, more chaotic outcome for their species, and an eventual, prolonged collapse. My action was merely the most efficient means to resolve that particular causal loop. The particles that once constituted the Borg now exist as diffused energy. They are not destroyed. Their configuration has merely changed. It is merely what is. "You wiped out an entire collective," Riker exclaimed, his face pale. "Millions, billions of individual minds, all gone." "The Borg are not individuals, Commander Riker," Manhattan corrected, his voice still devoid of emotion. "They are a collective. Their individual components have no independent causal flow. The collective consciousness represented a predetermined path to stagnation. Its cessation alters the causal tapestry in a manner that allows for a greater diversity of future actualities to unfold. It is a more efficient path." Q, recovering his composure, snapped his fingers, reappearing closer to Manhattan, his eyes now glinting with a dangerous mixture of respect and challenge. "A more efficient path. Indeed, you speak of altering the causal tapestry, Blue One, but is that not interference? Is that not a choice? You just eliminated a significant galactic threat, not out of passion or anger or even self-preservation, but out of a cold, calculated judgment of their inefficiency. You, Dr. Manhattan, have just made a profound, universe-altering choice." Manhattan's blue eyes met Q's. "Choice, as you define it, is an illusion. My action was merely the unfolding of a predetermined actuality. I perceived the most efficient causal path, and it was followed. Your definition of choice is merely your limited perception of the process. It is merely what is." Q laughed, a booming, triumphant sound. "Oh, but you did act, Blue One. You didn't just observe. You changed things. You just saved humanity from assimilation, not out of any emotional attachment, but out of a dispassionate assessment of the Borg's ultimate futility. And in doing so, you have opened up 1,000 new causal paths, new possibilities that didn't exist before you acted. You have intervened on a scale that dwarfs even my most extravagant games, my dear fellow." Picard, despite the lingering horror of the Borg's unmaking, felt a surge of defiant hope. Q was right. Manhattan had acted. He had made a choice, however detached, however framed, as an actuality. This was not mere observation. This was intervention on a cosmic scale. The implications were staggering. Dr. Manhattan, the detached observer, had just become the ultimate intervener, and in doing so had challenged his own deterministic philosophy. The universe, it seemed, was not as rigidly predetermined as he had claimed. The aftermath of the Borg's unmaking hung heavy on the Enterprise bridge, a disquieting calm after an unimaginable storm. Q's triumphant cackle about Dr. Manhattan's intervention echoed in the silence, a stark counterpoint to the crew's horrified awe. The starfield, now clear of the Borg cube, felt vast and terrifyingly empty. Picard stood, leaning on his command chair, trying to reconcile the chilling efficiency of Dr. Manhattan's actions with the Federation's core values. He had seen countless lives lost to the Borg, seen civilization scarred, yet the ease with which Manhattan had simply erased them, not with violence, but with pure, unfeeling deconstruction, was deeply unsettling. "Dr. Manhattan," Picard finally said, his voice quiet but firm, "you claim your action was not a choice, but merely the unfolding of a predetermined actuality. Yet you altered a major causal flow. You ended the existence of a galactic power. How is this not intervention on a scale that defies your own philosophy of detached observation?" Manhattan's blue eyes, usually so distant, seemed to hold a flicker of something, not emotion, but perhaps a deeper, more complex calculation. The Borg Collective's causal trajectory led to an ultimate stasis, a universal homogeneity, that would eventually stifle all true emergence of new actualities. My presence and the particular configuration of my quantum signature, when brought into proximity with their assimilation drive, created a unique causal nexus. The outcome was the most efficient resolution for the greater unfolding of diverse causal paths within this localized region of space-time. It was an inevitable consequence of the variables involved. Q, still hovering near Manhattan, scoffed. "Oh, don't be so modest, Blue One. You chose a more efficient outcome. You weighed the benefits of diverse actualities over Borg stagnation. That, my dear Stoic, is called a judgment, and a judgment, no matter how cold or logical, is a choice." My internal processes perceived the optimal resolution of the causal variables, Manhattan reiterated, his voice regaining its flat monotone. The Borg's assimilation represented a limitation on future causal possibilities. My action removed that limitation. It was the observed outcome of the intersection of our two realities. "But what about the lives, Dr. Manhattan?" Crusher asked, her voice filled with a raw, desperate empathy. The Borg were a threat, yes, but they were also beings. Billions of them, assimilated. You just unmade them. For the sake of diverse actualities, where is the value in that? "Value is a subjective construct, Doctor," Manhattan replied. The individual components of the Borg collective had no independent causal flow. Their existence was subsumed into a greater, homogeneous pattern. The cessation of that pattern allows for the reintegration of their constituent particles into new, emergent actualities. The energy and matter are not destroyed, they are merely reconfigured. Data, ever the logical observer, chimed in. Dr. Manhattan's explanation, though difficult to reconcile with our ethical framework, is consistent with his fundamental view of existence as a series of particle configurations. From his perspective, the Borg were merely a temporarily stable configuration of matter energy that inhibited the unfolding of more complex and diverse configurations. His action, however unsettling, appears to be a logical extension of his deterministic philosophy, albeit with a profound and unprecedented impact. Picard turned to Data, then to the silent blue figure. "So, if a species' causal flow, as you perceive it, leads to an outcome you deem inefficient or limiting of diverse actualities, would you intervene again, Dr. Manhattan?" Manhattan's luminous eyes seemed to expand, encompassing the entire Alpha Quadrant, then the galaxy beyond. "My perception encompasses the entirety of causality. Should a similar nexus arise where a pervasive force limits the unfolding of diverse actualities, and my presence is a variable in its resolution, then the most efficient causal path would again unfold. It is not a matter of would I, Captain, but what is." Q, observing this exchange, slowly began to smile again, a wide, knowing grin. "Ah, Jean-Luc, do you see, he speaks of most efficient causal paths and inevitable consequences, but the very act of deciding what is efficient, what limits diversity, is a judgment. He just created a new moral framework for intervention. He has become a cosmic arbiter of causality, whether he admits it or not." Q then clapped his hands together, his eyes sparkling with renewed mischief. "And now for the main event." Before anyone could react, the bridge was once again bathed in a blinding flash of light. When it cleared, the Enterprise was no longer in deep space. They were orbiting Khatura 3. The Class M planet, previously seen on auxiliary sensors, now filled the main view screen, its lush, green continents and nascent industrial cities starkly visible. And in orbit, positioned directly over the looming magma displacement that threatened to engulf the Keytran's capital, was Dr. Manhattan. He hung in space, a silent, glowing blue sentinel, effortlessly holding the planet's turbulent core in check. The seismic activity, which had been steadily increasing, had now completely ceased. Below, the Khitrans, unaware of their near annihilation, continued their lives. Smoke plumed from their primitive factories, airships drifted lazily across their sky, and the lights of their cities twinkled, utterly oblivious to the godlike being preventing their doom. What is happening?" Riker whispered, stunned. "He is holding the planet's core stable," Data reported, his voice filled with incredulity. "The magma displacement has been arrested. The seismic event will not occur. He has averted the catastrophe." Picard stared at the view screen, then at Q, who was now leaning back in a plush velvet chair that had suddenly appeared beside the captain's command seat, sipping from a glass of what appeared to be celestial champagne. "Q, you put him there," Picard accused, his voice tight. "You forced his hand." "Did I, Jean-Luc?" Q purred, taking another sip. "Or did I merely provide the perfect nexus for our blue friend's newfound commitment to diverse actualities? He simply followed the most efficient causal path, didn't he? A path that, in this instance, happened to coincide with preventing the suffering of billions? Oh, the irony!" "He's interfering?" Troy exclaimed, "directly violating the Prime Directive." "Ah, but is it a violation if the intervener himself claims it is merely the unfolding of an observed actuality?" Q countered, gesturing at Dr. Manhattan. "And besides, if Dr. Manhattan considers this an act of removing a limitation on diverse actualities, then perhaps he is merely ensuring the Khatrans have the opportunity to make their own choices, rather than having their destiny dictated by a molten core. A truly fascinating interpretation of your precious Prime Directive, wouldn't you agree?" Picard's gaze moved from Q's smug face to the distant blue figure holding a planet together. Manhattan was, in essence, performing the ultimate act of intervention, saving an entire pre-warp civilization from self-destruction. But not out of compassion, not out of empathy, but out of a dispassionate judgment that their destruction would limit diverse actualities. "He has saved them," Crusher stated softly, a hint of wonder in her voice. "He has averted the disaster, but at what cost to their future?" "The cost?" Manhattan's voice resonated from orbit, seemingly without the aid of comms, "is merely a variable in the unfolding causal tapestry. Their subsequent development will be different from the one I previously observed. Their art, their philosophy, their very identity will be shaped by the absence of that catastrophic event. This new trajectory allows for a greater diversity of emergent patterns. It is merely what is." Picard realized the profound implication. Dr. Manhattan, in his detached pursuit of efficient causal paths and diverse actualities, had become the ultimate embodiment of a moral dilemma. He was a being of ultimate power, now actively shaping the universe, yet claiming it was merely observation. He had preserved life, but had done so by stripping away the inherent value of choice and struggle. The Enterprise would have to grapple with this new reality. A being of godlike power now acted as a silent, unfeeling guardian, preventing inefficient suffering, shaping the destiny of worlds not out of love, but out of an alien calculus of causality. The Federation's ideals of non-interference and self-determination were not merely challenged, they were being actively redefined by a being who saw their choices as nothing more than the inevitable unfolding of predetermined events, even as he himself performed the ultimate act of intervention. The universe, for humanity, would never be the same. The Enterprise remained in silent orbit above Khitrar 3, a silent witness to Dr. Manhattan's cosmic intervention. The vibrant blue glow of his form, holding the planet's core in a state of suspended turbulence, was a stark reminder of the new, bewildering reality. Q, still lounging in his velvet chair on the bridge, observed Picard with a triumphant, yet speculative, gleam in his eye. "So, Jean-Luc," Q mused, swirling his celestial champagne, "your blue friend has become quite the humanitarian, wouldn't you say? saving billions of lives just like that, but without a single ounce of sentiment. It quite beggars belief, doesn't it? The ultimate good deed performed with ultimate indifference. Picard ignored Q, his gaze fixed on Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan, how long do you intend to maintain this planetary stabilization? Your presence here is a profound, albeit benevolent, violation of the Prime Directive. The Keterans cannot develop naturally under such conditions. Manhattan's omnipresent voice resonated from orbit, seemingly without effort. My presence here is merely the most efficient variable in the unfolding of a more diverse causal actuality for this species. The stabilization of their planetary core will be maintained until their own scientific advancement allows them to develop the capacity for tectonic control. I perceive this will occur in approximately 127.3 of your years. At that point, my presence as a direct, stabilizing force will no longer be the most efficient causal path. Another actuality will unfold. Riker shook his head in disbelief. 127 years, he's just going to hang there, holding a planet together for over a century? And what then, Dr. Manhattan? Data logically inquired. When their science has advanced to control their own tectonic forces and your direct influence is removed, will their cultural and technological development truly be natural, having occurred under the constant, albeit unseen, protection of a sentient being? Their development will be an actuality that would not have existed had the seismic event occurred, Manhattan replied, his voice unwavering. The variables have changed, the causal flow has shifted. The naturalness of their development is a subjective judgment. Their future is now a different set of emergent patterns. It is merely what is. Picard felt a profound sense of helplessness. Dr. Manhattan had indeed saved Keterar 3, but in doing so, he had fundamentally altered its destiny, not through malicious intent, but through an utterly alien, deterministic calculus. The Keterans would now develop in a universe where the ultimate threat of their planet's geology had been magically removed, unknowingly steered by a cosmic entity towards a path he deemed more diverse. This changes everything, Jean-Luc, Troi whispered, her voice heavy with the weight of the implications. The Federation's first contact protocols, the Prime Directive itself, they are utterly meaningless in the face of a being who can simply rewrite a species' causal flow based on an objective assessment of efficiency. Indeed, Counselor, Picard agreed, his eyes still on the distant blue figure. Dr. Manhattan has not just challenged our philosophy, he has circumvented it. He has demonstrated that ultimate power, devoid of conventional emotion, can achieve humanitarian ends without adhering to humanitarian principles. This is a terrifying precedent. Q, meanwhile, had finished his champagne and set the glass aside. He snapped his fingers, and Dr. Manhattan, with another silent shimmer of blue light, reappeared on the Enterprise bridge, standing beside Data's console once more. "Well, Blue One," Q announced, his voice regaining its boisterous tone, "you've certainly given Jean-Luc and his little crew something to chew on. A universe where free will is an illusion, but suffering can be averted by dispassionate intervention. What a delicious paradox." He turned to Picard. "So, Jean-Luc, what will you do now? Will you commend him for saving a species, or condemn him for violating every one of your precious ethical tenets?" Picard stared at Dr. Manhattan, then at Q. He knew a resolution was needed, not just for the sake of the Keterans, but for the Federation itself. Dr. Manhattan, your actions, however logical from your perspective, pose an existential challenge to the United Federation of Planets. Your capacity for unilateral intervention, guided by a subjective calculus of efficiency and diverse actualities, means you could fundamentally reshape the destiny of any species at any time. This cannot stand unchecked. Manhattan's luminous eyes focused on Picard. Your desire for checks is an attempt to impose your species' limited control upon a boundless cosmos. My actions are not subject to your ethical frameworks. They are merely the unfolding of causality. But your presence is now part of our causal flow, Picard insisted, stepping closer, his resolve hardening. And within our causal flow, we choose to believe in free will, in self-determination, in the right of every species to make its own mistakes and forge its own path. Your interventions, no matter how benignly intended, remove that fundamental right. The Federation cannot allow a single entity, however powerful, to act as an unfeeling arbiter of galactic destiny. Q watched, fascinated, as Picard stood his ground against a being of impossible power. "Then what do you propose, Captain Picard?" Manhattan asked, his voice still devoid of inflection, yet with a subtle shift, as if genuinely curious about this unfolding human variable. Picard took a deep breath. "We propose a new understanding. You have demonstrated that you are capable of immense intervention. We ask that you direct your observations, and if you must, your interventions not at individual species or planets, but at threats that challenge the very concept of diverse actualities within this universe, threats that are themselves forces of stagnation, like the Borg. You removed them because they limited future possibilities. We ask you to continue to act as a guardian of potential, but to allow civilizations to develop, to struggle, to choose their own path, even if it leads to what you perceive as inefficiency. We ask you to champion the unfolding of infinite diversity, not just through observation, but through protection of the right to diversity." Manhattan remained silent, his blue form humming softly. He was observing, processing this new set of variables. Q clapped his hands again, this time with genuine admiration. "Bravo, Jean-Luc, bravo! You've managed to couch your moral outrage in terms of his own cold logic. To ask a god of causality to protect the very thing he claims is an illusion. Choice! Truly, this is why I keep coming back to you humans. You are so wonderfully, maddeningly contradictory." Manhattan's head tilted. "You ask me to redefine my definition of efficiency to include the preservation of your species' concept of choice. You ask me to become an active variable in the protection of a freedom I perceive as semantic. This is a new causal branch. It is a request based on our fundamental beliefs, Dr. Manhattan," Picard stated, his voice firm. "It is our choice to offer this path. Your choice, if you perceive it as such, is to accept or reject it." Manhattan's gaze drifted to the view screen, where the distant star-filled void of space beckoned. "I perceive the Romulan Star Empire's continued efforts to understand and exploit my nature. Their causal trajectory includes attempts at replicating my abilities, leading to catastrophic instabilities. I perceive other nascent forces emerging in distant quadrants that also represent threats to the unfolding of diverse actualities, forces that seek to impose their own form of universal stagnation. The universe, as I observe it, is filled with systems that naturally limit potential." He turned back to Picard. "Your proposition creates a new, more complex causal nexus. My continued presence as an observer-protector of diverse actualities, acting only against those forces that fundamentally negate the emergence of unique futures, is a viable path. It allows for the preservation of your species' illusion of choice while still aligning with my own principles of optimizing causal efficiency. I will consider it." With that, Dr. Manhattan shimmered and then silently vanished from the bridge. Not with a flash or a transporter effect, but with the quiet inevitability of a thought dispersing. Q, for once, was genuinely speechless, though his smile was now wider than ever. He snapped his fingers and the velvet chair vanished. He's gone, Riker stated, stunned. He is considering, Data clarified. He has accepted the variables of Captain Picard's proposition into his causal calculus. His disappearance is merely his current optimal state for processing this new data and observing its unfolding implications. Picard stood for a long moment, staring at the empty space where Dr. Manhattan had been. The immediate crisis was over, but the universe had fundamentally changed. They had faced a being of ultimate power who saw all futures, and they had, against all odds, offered him a new one. Q, regaining his voice, winked at Picard. Well, Jean-Luc, it seems you've managed to convince a god to take an interest in your peculiar brand of self-delusion. He may not believe in choice, but you've given him one to observe. Fascinating, utterly fascinating. Perhaps humanity does have a future worth watching after all. And with a final, mischievous twinkle, Q2 vanished, leaving only the scent of ozone and the lingering echo of his laughter. The bridge slowly returned to a state of quiet professionalism. The Enterprise, battered but not broken, had navigated an impossible encounter. Dr. Manhattan, a silent blue guardian, now existed somewhere in the vastness, weighing the future of infinite diversity against the cold, hard logic of causality. The Federation had faced its greatest philosophical challenge and had, through sheer force of will and an unwavering belief in its ideals, carved out a new destiny, not just for itself, but perhaps for the very cosmos. The Enterprise D, under Captain Jean-Luc Picard's command, had weathered an unprecedented storm. Dr. Manhattan, the detached god of causality, had arrived, challenging every tenet of Federation philosophy, from the scientific understanding of reality to the moral agency of free will. His unmaking of a Borg cube and his subsequent, dispassionate intervention on K'Tera 3 had shattered the comfortable boundaries of Starfleet's non-interference policy. Yet, in the face of such absolute power and alien logic, humanity had not wavered. Picard's unwavering advocacy for the right to choice, even if an illusion, had presented Dr. Manhattan with a new variable, a causal path where he would act as a silent protector of diverse actualities, intervening only against forces of true stagnation. The Blue Entity's agreement to consider this new role, however detached, represented a profound shift. The Romulan Star Empire would undoubtedly view Manhattan's intervention on K'Tera 3 as a direct act against their ambitions, leading to a new era of Cold War defined by clandestine attempts to understand and exploit such cosmic power. Starfleet Command would struggle to codify protocols for a universe where such an entity existed, a universe where the Prime Directive had been simultaneously violated and perhaps redefined. Humanity's understanding of its own place in the cosmos had irrevocably expanded, now encompassing the possibility of a non-emotional, supremely powerful guardian of emergent futures. Dr. Manhattan, no longer merely an observer, had become a pivotal, if inscrutable force in the unfolding destiny of the Star Trek universe, forever altering its causal tapestry with his luminous, indifferent presence. To boldly go where no one has gone before. More stories await.